In this video, I'll be untangling the often complex and complicated world of audio cables in the home studio. What do you need to plug your things into your other things? But if it's your first time here, you might be asking yourself, who am I and what is this? Well, my name is Pete, and this is Studio Live Today, where my goal is to help you create, record, and release your best music. And let's be honest, you're not going to be recording or creating or releasing much of anything if you can't actually connect your gear to your other gear. So that's what we'll be talking in this one. We'll be talking XLR cables, TRS and TS cables, USB cables. We're going to go through all the gamut of digital and analog cables so that you can get up and running. And if you've got a question about how to connect your guitar, your microphone, your instruments to your mixer, your audio interface, your Mac, your PC, your iPhone, we are going to cover it in this video. So what is on the agenda? Oh, by the way, links to all of the cables and all of the gear that I've mentioned in this will be linked down in the description. And you can go to studiolivetoday.com/gear if you want to check that out. That's my gear guide. And those are affiliate links, meaning if you make purchase from that guide, they break off a chunk and send it my way. So what is on the agenda today? Number one, we're going to explain the basic difference between the types of cables and what each type is actually used for. We're going to go through some of the common connector types from TRS to RCA to XLR. What is each one of those actually for? We're then going to dive into some common devices and explain which one actually does what. So what about what output cable, what types do you use, and what input cable types do you use for each device? And then fourth and finally, we're going to take a look at some of the actual cables so you can actually get a feel and the reality of what you actually need to pick up. So if you've got your thing and you're connecting it to your thing, what cable do you actually need to go out and buy yourself? So I hope you are strapped in and ready to get going. So let's go through the types of cables. There are two main types of cables that we will be talking about. There are digital cables and there are analog cables. So an example of digital cables are things like USB cables that we use to plug in mixers and audio interfaces, and MIDI cables that we plug in our MIDI instruments into our computers, our Macs and our PCs and our iPads and iPhones. And then there are analog cables. So your analog cables are things like instrument cables and XLR cables for your microphone. That black cables, very black. So yes, you've got two different types of cables. One sends data, so one sends a digital signal. So there's no actual audio running through these cables. This is just ones and zeros, just data going through these, whereas your analog cable is actually sending the analog signal. So that's why you can use these with devices that have nothing digital at all. You can plug an electric guitar into a valve amplifier, plug it in with a instrument, a TS cable, and you'll be off to the races. So that is the main difference in the two types. Now we'll be focusing mostly on analog because, to be honest, digital is pretty simple. As long as you have a connection, it's on or it's off. So you just need to find out what connector type you need, plug it in, and it should work. So whether it's USB A, B, or C, or whether it's a H, like any other sort of cable that you're using, micro, mini USB, whatever, that's going to work. Analog gets a little bit more confusing. Now, when we get into the analog world, there are two different types of cable. There are mono cables, like we just looked at here, like the TS, the instrument cable that we had here. And don't worry, all these acronyms I'll explain as we go along. So if you're like, what's that TS? We'll talk about what that is. And we have stereo. So this is an RCA stereo cable. It's got a stereo 3.5mm jack on this end, TRS, and it's got two RCAs on this end. So the difference is one is mono, it's sending one audio signal. One is stereo, it's sending two audio signals. It's sending the left and the right signal. So if you're needing a stereo cable, you need something like an RCA, a TRS, and we'll talk about the difference between those in a moment. The final thing that is one of the sort of big deciding factors is whether a cable is balanced or unbalanced. So let me grab this one here. So you might look at these two cables that we have here and think they look very similar, but there's a key difference. This one here is a TS cable. It's got a tip and a sleeve, and that's it. It's got two connections. It's sending a copy of the signal and it's sending the ground or the shield. This one is a TRS. It stands for tip, ring, and sleeve. So it's got three connections. The difference is that this one can be used either for stereo, meaning it can send the left channel, the right channel, and the ground in its three connections, or it can be used as a balanced cable. And I'll give you the quickest version I can of an explanation of balanced cables. Short version is they send a better quality signal and can be used over longer cable runs, whereas unbalanced sends a signal that is susceptible to interference from RF, from radio frequencies, and can only be used in short runs, say 5 to 6 meters maximum. The reason a balanced cable is better is it sends 2 copies of the signal, but what it does is it flips the polarity of one of them, so it reverses that, and then when it gets to the end, it flips them back. Now, the reason it does this is that it flips them, goes along, any noise that it picks up, when it flips them back, that noise is actually cancelled out. It's a reverse polarity trick that electrical engineers and people and audio engineers know a lot more about than I do, but it means that a balanced cable is going to give you better quality signal, and where you have the option to use one, you probably should. We'll talk more about that as we go along. So there you go. There are your three. There's your 3 sort of key things: analog versus digital, mono versus stereo, and balanced versus unbalanced, and mostly across the analog world. But we'll continue on. And let's talk about connection types, I know. So connectors, we have a bunch of different types. We've already spoken about TS, and we've already covered a lot of this, so there'll be only a little bit in here. TS stands for tip and sleeve, your standard instrument cables and speaker cables, and cables like this that only have one signal going through, as well as the ground, tip and sleeve. They're going to be your TS, and they are always going to be a mono cable because they're only sending one signal. So your TS cables are going to be mono. Difference with a TRS cable and another version of a TRS cable is something like this, our 3.5 mil jack. This has tip, ring, and sleeve. And as I said before, in these cases, in the smaller ones, 3.5 mil, they're usually used for stereo. So these would be very familiar if you've ever used a CD, I'm going to say a CD player or a Walkman, an MP3 player, a smartphone, although hold that because smartphones are slightly different, but anything that just uses a standard headphone jack, whether it's this size or whether you use an adapter to adapt it up to this size, to a 1/4 inch or a 6.35 millimeter, again, tip, ring, sleeve. It's going to send a stereo signal, or as we mentioned before, it can be used to send a balanced signal. So your higher end gear, and this is used for things like outputting from mixers and audio interfaces, will use your balanced TRS. There is then TRRS, which is on your headphone jack like this, and this is tip, ring, ring, sleeve. So yes, you've got an extra one in there again. What this one sends is left and right audio output, but it also sends a microphone input, a mono microphone input. So in the case of something like this, which is a headset that has a microphone built in, it can send the microphone signal one way and the stereo audio back into your headphones. And of course, it has the ground as well. So that's why it's got the 4 connections in there. So that is TRRS, or tip, ring, ring, sleeve. And of course, if you've got an iPhone or iPad, you'll need something like this to adapt your Lightning to your headphone or your TRRS. And then you can use any gear that uses TRRS on your mobile device. We then have XLR. Now, we showed this before. I've got my big, long, black XLR cable here. And again, because this is balanced, the reason that these cables can be much longer is they're balanced. They do that cool polarity trick that I mentioned before. So these have 3 prongs. Again, they have the 2 audio and the 1 ground, and they're shielded, and they do a good job of rejecting noise. These are generally used for microphones. So when you're plugging your microphones into your audio interface or your mixer, then you'll use an XLR cable. And finally, we have one that we showed before is the RCA cable. Now, these are used, you'd probably recognize these if you've been around a while from back in the day, these old red and white phono cables. They are mono, so each one of these are mono, but they usually come in pairs, left and right, for stereo. And in the case of this one, we've got a cable here that adapts this to a 3.5 mil TRS. So these are the sort of standard cables you use if you're connecting up some generally lower end gear. So some monitor speakers will use RCA, some sort of DJ mixer equipment and other things will use RCA connections. So that is the other one in the analog world. Now, digital is a lot simpler, sort of. So these days, digital usually involves USB. So most of your devices will plug in via USB. Now, your audio interfaces and your mixers are probably going to use something like this, a USB A to B cable, like this one. It'll usually come with it, and that's just sending your digital signal from your mixer or your audio interface into your device. And a bunch of other audio gear uses USB. Remember, this is sending digital signals. So it means that the gear is doing the analog to digital conversion. So for instance, if I grab my Tascam USM 125, US 125M, an older but still a very versatile little mixer audio interface here, you can see on the back here, it has its USB, if you can see it, USB-B plug there. All we need to do to plug this sucker into any device is plug it in like that. And then we've got a USB plug there ready to plug this in and use all the other connections, which we'll show you later in the video. If you've got a more modern device, it may use something like this, USB-C, which is just a smaller, different connection. You may have devices that use USB micro or USB mini. They'll generally come with the device. That's why I say digital is easier, because usually you get the cable you need to connect up the things. The other digital cable we use in the world of home recording is the MIDI cable. So this is actually a MIDI to USB adapter. So this takes a MIDI signal from an older style keyboard, these 5-pin DIN connectors, and converts it to USB. This is the Edirol USB, what is it, the UM1X. There's the UM1 by Roland, which is a new version of this. And again, studiolivetoday.com/gear if you want to check this and any of this other gear out. So that's your digital. Now there's other digital things that have happened in the past. FireWire is something that people have used and some folks still use. There's things like fibre optic Toslink cables and all sorts of other things, but there's so many. I'm not going to cover the 5 or 10%. We'll cover the 90% of what most folks are going to use. So TRS and TRRS, as you would have seen before, actually come in different sizes. So they come in a, where's my cable? They come in a 3.5mm size and a 6.35mm size, so 1/8 inch and 1/4 inch. And the beauty part is you can use adapters. There's a heap of different adapters you can get that can either go that way or they can even go the other way. So you can get TRS, which goes from an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch down to an 1/8 inch. All the adapters that you can use are pretty handy. This is one that uses 2 RCA and converts it into a TRS stereo. So you've got things like that you can use, and even ones that do like a double adapter job. They take 2 mono signals and turn it into a stereo signal. So all you're really looking for is a couple of things. Is what is the connection type that it uses? Is it stereo or mono? And is it balanced or unbalanced? They're really the only considerations you have. And if you work that out, you can connect up most gear to most other gear without too many problems. So in the analog world, look for those sort of things. And again, if you want examples of all the cables that I use and the connection types, head over to studiolivetoday.com/gear. Right, let's jump into the next section. This will be a bit of fun. Now, I don't have all the things because so many things to connect up here, but we're going to go, I'll use this little interface again because it'll be good to show you some of the different connections that we have. So let's go through the devices and the output devices first. So if we were plugging something into this, we're outputting from something else. How would we plug it in? Well, your guitars and your keyboards and your mono instruments is just a standard instrument cable, a TS cable. Now, I'll mention at this point, use an instrument cable, not a speaker cable. There's a bunch of different differences. And in fact, I've put a link down to a video that CS Guitars, very cool YouTube channel, did on the difference between instrument and a speaker cable. Check that one out if you want to know the difference. But the short version is only use your instrument cable from your instrument to your amp and only use your speaker cable from your amp to your speakers or to your PAs, because otherwise you get into trouble. You can actually damage your equipment. But the beauty part is we take our guitar, we plug one end into the guitar, the other end goes into any TS or TRS jack. So you can actually use this with a TRS input, but make sure that it's an instrument jack as opposed to a line level input. So your gear will show that. It'll be called a high Z or instrument input, and you'll plug that into that, and then the other end into your guitar, and you are good to go. So that is your guitar or mono instruments. Now, your keyboard or your piano may actually have stereo output. So if it does, it may be in the form of a stereo 1/4 inch jack like that. So a headphone output, something like that. You could use a cable like this to convert it to RCA, or you could use one of the other cables we'll show you later to convert it to 2 1/4 inch TS cables that will plug straight into 2 channels. So you can have left and right if you're using a stereo mixer or stereo interface. Let's move on to the next one. Where's my list here? MIDI keyboard. Now, if you are wanting to use the MIDI of your MIDI keyboard, you'll either need just a standard USB cable like the A to B cable we showed before, or if it's an older style, you'll need a USB to MIDI cable like this one. And the difference is connecting it up that way will only send the note information. It won't send any audio. So if you want to use the sounds that are on your software, you use MIDI. If you want to use the sounds that are on your hardware, your actual keyboard sounds, you use an audio cable, an analog audio cable, and plug it into an interface or a mixer. We'll continue on here. PC or Mac. So most PCs and Macs use 3.5mm TRS as their output. So anything that has something called line out or stereo line out, I'm just trying to find my cable again, line out or stereo line out on your Mac or PC is probably going to be this sucker. So if you want to actually send it out. Now, it's similar on your smartphone or your tablet, but it's slightly different. We'll tell you about why that is different in a moment. But yes, most of them will have this. Now, some newer laptops will actually have the next one, which is our TRRS, which is what is on your smartphone and your tablet. So that's this one here. That's the tip ring sleeve. Only difference is it's not only sending stereo audio out, it's sending mono audio in for the microphone. So if you've only got one 3.5mm jack on your laptop, it is probably TRRS. And this is one of the traps folks can fall into, is that you're trying to plug a TRS into a TRRS and things don't work. So if you're using like a microphone that uses a 3.5mm jack, it can sometimes not work. Now, there are things called TRRS to TRS adapters, which are made by Audio Technica, and Rode make one as well. They're over at studiolivetoday.com/gear. So if you need to convert your things to your other things, check that one out as well. Let's continue on with our output devices. So a microphone, we've already talked about it, but it uses an XLR. So it uses a balanced output like this. If we're plugging a microphone into a mic jack, there's the male end that goes into our XLR port. The female end goes into our microphone, and you're good to go. It's a simple connection and is a balanced analog XLR connection there. What about audio interfaces and mixers? What do they have as outputs? Well, I'm glad you asked, and I'll show you this one again. This one in particular here has RCA outputs. You can see there, it's got those red and white. So this has unbalanced inputs. Oh, it's like I'm looking through binoculars. Has unbalanced outputs, sorry. So if you're sending this out, you need to send this to speakers, or you're sending this to some PA system or another mixer, then you need an unbalanced cable. You can convert your unbalanced to, or your RCA back to 1/4 inch. We'll show you that in a moment. If you're using, let's grab my mixer here. So this is my old Samson mix pad, because this has a bunch of different things. You'll notice this also has RCA input and output, but it also has balanced TRS 1/4 inch output. So if you have both, always use the TRS and use a TRS cable, because it just means you're going to get better quality audio, less chance of interference from those horrible radio frequencies, and less chance of noise coming into your signal. Noise is the enemy of home recording. If you can reduce noise in any way, you should probably do it. So what do you need for outputting mixer or audio interface? You need depending on what it is, RCA unbalanced or a TRS balanced output as well. What about inputting things? So going back the other way. So input devices, audio interfaces, well, they usually have, let's grab this. We'll grab another one, the Steinberg UR22C. This one has combo jacks. So these two here are combo jacks, and they accept a 1/4 inch TRS in the middle there as a line signal or as an instrument signal. You can swap it to either, and they have an XLR ring around the outside. So you can plug in your XLR cables and be good to go there as well. So most of your audio interfaces have things like that. Mixers are very much the same. They will have the same sort of inputs, a 1/4 inch or an XLR, and they do the same sort of thing. Amplifiers. So your standard guitar amp usually only has a TS input. And an important thing to note is when you're plugging guitars in, there is no benefit. You might be saying, Pete, you said balanced is cool. Maybe I should use balance with my guitar. No, and in fact, don't, because it not only will it not do anything, it may not work, and it may actually damage your gear. So only use a TS, tip sleeve, mono cable connecting your guitars to your amps, because your amplifier is only going to have an input for an instrument, a 1/4 inch TS instrument cable. So use something like this instead, and you'll be good to go with your instruments into your amplifiers. Same with speakers and PAs, but again, keep in mind the difference between an instrument cable and a speaker cable. Just make sure, and trust me on this one, instrument, use an instrument cable. If you're plugging into a speaker from an amp or from another powered source, use a speaker cable and you'll be good to go. Finally, smartphones and tablets, well, they have, again, the 3.5mm TRRS. So the input from them is only a mono microphone. And this is what a lot of folks get tripped up on. If you're trying to record something into your smartphone or your tablet, what a lot of folks do is they think, oh, it's got a headphone jack. That must act like the input as well as the output. I'll plug into that and I'll record my stereo device. So you might try and get, say, an RCA like this. You get an RCA plug, and then you convert that and you plug it into 3.5mm. You put it into your smartphone or your tablet and try to record on it. It's not going to work, unfortunately. So keep that in mind as well. It's only mono audio input. Alrighty, now that was a lot to get through. If you need to hit pause or go back to any sections, do so. There are timestamps in the description as well if you're watching on the replay, so you'll be able to jump through to the different sections, which is something I should have told you at the start. Anyway, let's finish up here with some examples of the common cables. So what I'll do, we'll throw my screen up here, because over at studiolivetoday.com/gear, we have all of these cables listed. So these are, I found, the most common types of cables. I've got a big pile of them over here that I've been showing you through the video, but I've got a bunch of cables over here, and these are the ones that I use that I'm going to recommend here. So here is your standard XLR cable. So there it is. It looks like that. It has a male 3-prong connector. It has a female 3-prong connector at one end. It's got the little clip there that makes sure it clips in and fits snugly into your gear. And you can see that I've purchased this exact cable back in April. I've purchased many of these cables. This is the Amazon Basics, and some people look down their nose at the Amazon Basics brand. I mean, 4.5 stars on 2,800 ratings. They're affordable. They're decent quality. Like if you're a total audiophile and you're in $1 million studio, yeah, maybe you'd spend a bit more on a cable. In the home studio, I use these. I find that they do a really good job. So that's your basic microphone cable, your XLR cable. Let's move on to the next one. Here is our TRS cable. So I mentioned that a lot of your sort of higher end gear will use things like a TRS. So it's not going to make it bigger. There's your TRS cable. And in fact, I think I have that exact cable is the one that I was showing you here before. This one here, TRS cable, tip ring sleeve. It is used for outputting from things like your audio interfaces or your mixers to monitor speakers, and from outputting from your higher end things like digital keyboards and pianos into mixers and audio interfaces. So anything that is a balanced or a TRS connection will need one of these suckers here. Moving on here. Now, these are really adaptable cables. I've got a heap of these running around because quite often you want to just get a dual mono. They're a dual mono TS cable. So you can use these for one thing, for mono, for sending 1-to-1. But if you've got gear that has just sort of standard 1/4-inch outputs left and right, and you want to go into your mixer that's got standard 1/4-inch outputs in, then you can use something like this. Now, these are only TS. So if you needed TRS, you'd need to grab a couple of cables like this. But if you're just using it to get a signal from one place to another and you want a cheap and easy alternative to that, you can use this one here, a dual TS to TS, to connect your stereo to your stereo sound. This one, I have a heap of these. So these are really useful because a lot of my older gear has RCA connections and 3.5mm stereo connections. So you would have seen that I had one of these over here somewhere. I've got too many cables here. Does anyone not actually like cables? Here it is. Yeah, so this is this exact cable. So 2 RCA plugs at one end, a 3.5mm plug at the other end, and it's just handy to have around for connecting up things like smartphones. So whenever I'm playing something like this through my mixers like this, I connect one end to my 3.5mm output, the other end to the RCA input on this, and I'm off to the races. The other more useful one these days is, and I hope I got these in order, hooray, is this. So this is the same version, but it's 1/4-inch. So if, for instance, I wanted to grab my iPhone or my iPad, plug into the headphone jack, or in the case of this, use my dongle, my lightning to USB, and then plug that into the 2 line inputs here, I would use something like this. Now, this is only going to be TS because remember, the 3.5mm coming out is stereo, so it's unbalanced. So there's no point trying to go from 3.5mm to TRS unless it's a stereo 3.5mm to 3.5mm, which we'll show in a moment. But if you're going to 2 inputs like this, a 2-channel interface, and you want to record your stereo input, then using something like this is going to be your best bet. Is it going to zoom us in? There it is in all its glory. I like these Hosa cables. They're a good balance. You can see they're nice and thick on the cable side. They're not sort of thin and flimsy. And I mean, still plastic encasing, but yeah, for the price, what are these? Like $8, $8 US. And again, 4.5 stars, 1,300 ratings. Yeah, you can't really go far wrong with these brands. Here is that 3.5mm to 3.5mm. I don't think I brought one with me over here, but they are super handy as well. They will help you connect up your 3.5mm devices to other things. So you'd use these if you've got a car that's got an aux in. That would be a TRS stereo input. If you want to plug in your TRS stereo devices, you can use a 3.5mm to 3.5mm. And you can see that I've also bought this exact cable in the past as well. And finally, last but not least, this is a handy one. This is good. So let's say that I plugged into this sort of device and then I wanted to output from something that has unbalanced RCA, but I want to plug it into something that's got, say, inputs like this one that has 2 channels with 1/4 inch. Well, then you can use a cable just like this one. Once again, Hosa, once again, 4.5 star ratings. They just plug and they work, and they're great for the home studio. So once again, like $6 for that one. So if you head over to studiolivetoday.com/gear, all of these different cables are listed there. And the tip there, as I mentioned before, is that it really comes down to making sure that you know one of those 3 things. Is it mono or stereo? So is the signal you're sending mono, so just one channel, or is it stereo? Is it left and right? Is it 2 channel? Do you need a balanced or an unbalanced cable? So if you have a TRS jack on your on your device, on your mixer, on your whatever, then use a balanced cable. If it's not, then don't worry about it. Use an unbalanced cable. There's going to be no benefit. In fact, you might do damage if you use a balanced cable. And of course, whether it's analog or digital. And then all you need to work out is the connection type. And don't forget, you can adapt anything. This is RCA to 1/4 inch. You can adapt that. Again, you can go 3.5mm to 6.35mm. You can go 2 mono into 1 stereo. So this one can be super handy as well for adapting some of your signals. So there's a heap of different ways that you can change the cable connection types. Keep in mind a few things though. With quality, the longer the cable, more likely there'll be interference. So get the shortest cable possible, and the more links in your cable, so the more connections, more analog connections, the more likely you're going to get interference into your signal. There you go. I hope you found this useful. We have more videos linked down in the description. You can also go to studiolivetoday.com/gear to check out my complete guide. Hopefully this helped you work out how to connect your things to your other things. I'll see you next time.